The former Federal Reserve chairman and the current one both agree on a key issue, and this directly relates to the crisis that's going on right now, not just the pandemic, but the economic fallout. And you're going to see here Jerome Powell is the first one, current Federal Reserve chairman, and then you'll see Ben Bernanke, who was in charge during the 2008 crash.
Well, the Federal Reserve doesn't exactly print money, but as one writer put it, you do have the ability to conjure money out of thin air. My question to you is simple. Is there any limit to the amount of money the Fed is willing to put into this economy to keep it afloat? Is it a blank check?
Savannah, we, in certain circumstances like the present, we do have the ability to essentially use our emergency lending authorities. And the only limit on that will be how much backstop we get from the Treasury Department. We're required to get full security for our loans so that we don't lose money. And so the Treasury puts up money as we estimate what the losses might be. But essentially, the answer to your question, though, is no. We can continue to make loans, and really the point of all that is to support the flow of credit in the economy to households and businesses.
Is that tax money that the Fed is spending?
It's not tax money. The banks have accounts with the Fed, much the same way that you have an account in a commercial bank. So to lend to a bank, we simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account that they have with the Fed. So it's much more akin, although not exactly the same, but it's much more akin to printing money than it is to borrowing.
Isn't that something? Isn't that something? So basically, you have the Federal Reserve chairman. They all agree. We control our currency. We're a sovereign country. We have our own currency. So if we need to, we just mark up the account. Money based on nothing. Printing money. And move a decimal point on the computer, and we're done. And there's also wide agreement that when you're in a crisis, you have to spend your way out of it. Now, this is the logic of, is what FDR did during the Great Depression. Hey, we need a new deal. We need a new deal. We're in the midst of the Great Depression. Everybody's out of work. Unemployment is skyrocketing. I'm going to put the country back to work. I'm going to put them back to work doing infrastructure projects, having programs that get money to people. So, yeah, it actually is widely agreed upon that when the rubber hits the road and there's a real crisis, this is what we have to do. So, in other words, you're not buying into the logic of the Austrian economists who, want us back on the gold standard, for example, and are super concerned about the deficits and the national debt. And they say, hey, you got to take a hands-off approach, and, you can't just artificially prop up the money supply and just print money. That's what the Austrian economists would say. Then you have the Keynesians, who are more in agreement with this philosophy. But in my opinion, it looks like all these guys are modern monetary theorists. And Stephanie Kelton is somewhere watching this smiling right now because they all agree with her. What she says is, yeah, we have our own currency. We control our own currency. We have to control inflation, but we could just mark up the account and spend if we want. Now, I want you to take note of what is unanimous agreement on this front. You're seeing it right now under Democratic administrations, under Republican administrations. The head of the central bank is like, yeah, this is what we do. Okay. So if we agree that in the time of crisis, you can just fix it, you spend your way out of it, why do we not consider the 45,000 people who die every year because they don't have basic health care? Why is that not a crisis? And by the way, it's 45,000 to 68,000. Is that not a crisis? Is the tens of millions of people without health insurance, is that not a crisis? Is the 500,000 homeless people in this country, is that not a crisis? Is the 78% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, is that not a crisis? Is half of workers making $30,000 a year or less, is that not a crisis? Are these things, is climate change not a crisis? That's not a crisis? So I think you get my point. My point is, the only time it's like widely agreed upon that we're in a crisis is when the market falls. When we enter a bear market. When we have a sharp drop in the market. Oh my God, the Dow Jones and the NASDAQ. That's when the Fed is like, oh, we better do something. But when there are the everyday crises of regular working people and poor people, they're just like, oh, our concern is the market. Well, maybe that's the problem. And if you want to say, hey, look, that's a little different. It's not tax money. It's the central bank. Fair enough. But shouldn't we also have that same logic and same approach when it comes to the government, when it comes to the House of Representatives and the Senate and the president, the legislative branch and the executive branch? Why wouldn't we have that same approach? And by the way, we do have it in certain circumstances. They didn't pay for that multi-trillion-dollar tax cut. The 2017 Republican tax cut, which was like the Bush tax cuts on steroids, multi-trillion-dollar tax cut bill, 83% of the benefits went to the top 1% and the corporations. They didn't pay for it. They just said, oh, we're going to do this. Why? Because we value it, so we're going to do it. Okay, but you're adding to the deficit and the national debt. I don't care. We're going to do it. We could do it. What do you mean? How could you do it? You're not even paying for it. We control our currency. We could do whatever the hell we want. If we want to increase the deficit, we have every ability to do that. We do. And it's not like those people didn't get the tax cuts because you're adding to the deficit in the process. No, it still had the impact. So, same theory applied. You could just give everybody healthcare. You could just do Medicare for all, and you don't have to pay for it. Now, we could have a debate as to whether or not you should. And, usually when the economy is roaring and doing well, you want to have confiscatory policy. So you're basically saving for a rainy day. So, you're taking in more money than you're spending out. But when the economy hits a rough patch, you're supposed to do the opposite. You're supposed to spend more. You're supposed to do deficit spending. Spend your way out of the crisis. So we could have a debate as to whether or not it's reasonable to pay for it, but the idea that you have to pay for it is just fundamentally untrue when you control your own currency. Again, you always have to worry about inflation, and you have to be cognizant of that. But broadly speaking, you control your own currency, you can do what you want. So if we wanted to pay for Medicare for all, if we wanted to do free college, we could easily do it. Easily do it. And by the way, we're talking about peanuts, at least in the case of free college. It's like $60 billion or $80 billion. That's nothing. They just casually passed a $4.5 trillion bailout. You couldn't do free college? Of course they could. You can't wipe the debt slate clean? $1 trillion to wipe the debt slate clean, or 1.5 to wipe the debt slate clean for student loans. They can do that. They choose not to do that. So this is my point, guys. Do not let them gaslight you, because they will do that. And they will keep asking anytime it's something that helps regular people, hey, you can pay for it. Come on, bro, you can pay for it. They'll always throw it out there. But they're gaslighting you. Because clearly, as you could see, everybody agrees. Left, right, and center in a time of crisis. Oh, we just do it. We just do what we have to do. That's it. We just do it. Well, to me, stopping 45,000 to 68,000 people dying because they don't have health care every year, that's a crisis. And you know how we should stop that? We should just do it.